Well, am I on this mic?
You're on the bike. You're on the bike.
Oh, good. Okay. As you can tell, this is hot. We are here to talk a significant injury. By the way, we might be excited in terms of what this might mean for Arsenal, but I know we want this to be confused with celebrating an injury. I'm not celebrating a professional player being injured. Obviously, it's not a nice thing. So, genuine best wishes to Rodri. But there is some huge news. Yeah, for Arsenal. But there's some absolutely huge news, which we're trying to go, which is why we're going live. We recorded our podcast earlier. George and I have been chatting, but some big news is broken about Rodri. Some good sources as well. So let's talk about that. So David Ornstein has said that Rodri is expected to miss a significant period with serious knee injury. Man City midfielder suffered a problem in Man City's draw versus Arsenal. Duration not confirmed. Tests continue, but 28-year-old Spain international set for long absence. There's also reports from ESPN. There's also reports from Marca. There's all sorts of other. Just be careful of your mic's rubbing, mate. There's reports from sort of various other publications. So yeah, forgive us slightly doing this on the fly. But yes, George. Yeah, this is huge. This is absolutely huge. I think we spoke about this on the main pod earlier. I think this is the day where Arsenal win the title. I don't want to go too early, but I genuinely think this is the moment where, as I said to you before, I was waiting for the outcome of the investigation. I felt it was maybe 51-49 in City's favour. I thought the investigation would massively change that, but this has happened. And I think this means it's Arsenal's title to lose. That's what I feel.
I said it in the pod, not to repeat something, so everybody go check it out. The pod just dropped as well. I know this is impromptu, but I said Rodri is City's point of failure. As far as that kind of 4P team goes, when you analyze the success of Manchester City, Rodri, you cannot dissuade, the impact that he has. And I don't know, mate, in the meantime, if you can go up, I just did a little tweet to talk about our podcast, but I have a picture from Forder Football, who I think was brilliant in terms of setting that in. Yeah, in terms of understanding the qualitative impact on this, it's incredible. Like, you cannot dissuade it. And you know what, mate? Like, I've sat here and, while we're sitting there saying that we don't wish any harm on a player, which we don't, let's be clear. Like, I mean, you don't want to hear it from anything. I have zero sympathy, mate. Everybody told me the reason that Arsenal didn't win the title in 22-23 had absolutely everything to do with William Saliba and the injury. And everyone said, suck it up, mate. Suck it up. And that injury was significant. And it lasted at least 2 months for us in a business end of the season. And zero people gave us sympathy at all. So when I'm sitting there talking about, I don't wish injury, but I have zero sympathy for Manchester City. Absolutely none. And it's completely on their own recruitment, by the way, their own issue for not having a Rodri backup. With all their infinite resources, they've tried endlessly trying to do it. And fundamentally, I have zero asterisk next to this. Let's not make a mistake. Arsenal broke City yesterday. It had nothing to do with the Rodri injury for me. I saw a team broken. I saw a team whining, crying to the ref. I've never seen so many post-match interviews from City players ever. I saw a team match them and for once not bow down to the almighty City and say, take the title, good sir. And this team said no. They stood up. They said no. So from my perspective, I think we broke their will yesterday. I think, unfortunately, their player broke today. And I think that their club will break following the charges. And I think when you start to look at it, we're going to have some very uncomfortable conversations about Pep, about Manchester City, the quality, and what you're going to do. Because right now, mate, I'm telling you, the questions that are coming are competitiveness. The questions that are coming are further allegations than that. And it's a wider conversation that I know we had to bottleneck last May when we tried to have a little bit of it. And I went really hard back then. I feel the same way. And I just think that this Manchester City side without Rodri is probably more significant than any player, I would say, for Arsenal. Like, I don't think people realize how big of a point of failure Rodri is for Manchester City.
Just quickly on this Sutton Explorer, you're right. This is up to February of this year. So this is for a year, I think, between February the 5th, 2023 and February 4th, 2024, I think was the data.
Yes.
Yeah, George. I broadly agree with a lot of what you're saying, and I think someone in the chat as well, Vivlad, said this might be the single most important player to any team in the league, and I think that's not a bad shout. I really do buy that. Look, George, it's obviously it's hard to project forward, and these things sound really hyperbolic, but there is absolutely a world where this is the moment where, as I say, I think this means we win the title. I genuinely do mean that. I think based on the evidence of yesterday, but also based on what we can do, based on how City play without Rodri, based on the problems they've had without that. But then moving forward, as we know the results of the investigation are coming, is this a huge moment in English football history? And, look, when news drops, you go, come on, mate, chill out. But realistically, there is absolutely a world where Rodri's injury means that Arsenal went on to win the title, by which point the City investigation has finished. There's obviously the consequences that have happened, and we have a sea change in English football. I think with Rodri, there's an absolute chance that they go on to win the title. But without him, a much smaller one. So this could be a really, really significant game. Significant moment. Want to come to some of your comments. So don't know says if Rodri stays on yesterday, we lose that game. I think you actually said that in the podcast, didn't you? I think you said that they would have been a lot better trying to break us down with Rodri, because Ruben Diaz was the one who was tasked with all the touches, all that sort of stuff. That would have been Rodri.
And it's not even just the touches as well. Like, I'm thinking from a perspective of actual goals. Who in the league is responsible for setting the tempo of an entire team as much as Rodri does, whilst contributing a level of box crashing that guarantees like minimum 10 goals a season? It's truly incredible. I mean, again, he is one of the two best DMs on the planet, side by side with Rice. Different styles, but those are the two best clear DMs in world football. I'm sorry you lose somebody that important, pillar. I don't care who you are. It's detrimental, and it's detrimental for the season. And, I think when you start to talk about what can City do in January, I mean, there's questions that are saying, how are they going to respond to this? Mate, how would you respond if you've got charges that are over the top of your head that are going to break likely in January? I mean, you're going to have them break now, but the verdict will be confirmed in January. So if you're a player and you're Joshua Kimmich, name your favorite, Zubamendi, you're named anybody, how are you going to go and sign your career to a ship that could be relegated for the next 2 years? You're just simply not going to do it. Mm-hmm. So there's a wider conversation here that I think, even as far as the January transfer window and what they can do, I think they're capped. And you're talking about internal solutions, and you're talking about John Stones, who can't stay fit every 30 days. You're going to rely on that. I mean, it's a serious question. It really is.
Yash says, guys, at least wait for the confirmation. Firstly, David Ornstein has confirmed it's going to be out for a significant period, but many other outlets have said it's the whole season. Regardless, I'd be saying all of this stuff if it was a significant period. I think that's how important I think Rodri is. But a lot of other outlets, and I presume, we're maybe slightly before the final confirmation, but loads of outlets are saying it is the whole season. So that's where that comes from. Dude, it's huge. It's absolutely huge. I think you're right about that January plans. I think also, if we think back to Liverpool and Arsenal's stuff in the summer, look, you don't want to be accused of copium. You don't want to be accused of kind of retroactively analysing. But if new information comes out, then new information comes out. And there has been some people who have been saying that Arsenal, it was in their thinking. Certainly financial experts that I've seen, or people on in various publications have been saying that this was certainly in the thinking in terms of having a look at what was going to happen to Man City. And that makes total sense, by the way. If this wasn't a conversation, at least as a scenario, what you do in these situations is you scenario plan. If this happens, we do X. If so-and-so doesn't sign their contract's extension, we do Y. That is what you want as a football club. So if they're not planning for what happens if City get relegated, what happens if Rodri has an ACL, what happens if if you're not planning for that, I think you're underprepared. It's not to say you're expecting it to happen, or you wish it to happen, or you're relying on it happening. None of that. But you need to be prepared. I think that's what we need to be, because this is a huge moment.
And I think also one thing that we haven't quite touched on: what's the fear factor with City without Rodri from other teams? One of the things that we've talked about is the impact on Arsenal specifically. But can I ask you, what does Chelsea, Tottenham, Spurs, or sorry, not Tottenham, Spurs, they are that. Liverpool, Brighton, Fulham. How did these teams go in knowing that they're not facing a Rodri City? And when that happened, everybody was a lot more brave. They were a lot more willing to meet Manchester City. And I just think that this is going to be a major issue, even if it's for 2 months. Let's assume that everyone's getting ahead of themselves, and it's not, even though it isn't. There's so many
If David,
stories that
okay,
are
let's
coming.
say David Ornstein's ahead of himself, and a significant time means 2 months. I still think it matters.
That's what I was saying. Like 2 months is still far and away, especially at this point in the season. It's still incredible impact. And I go back to the William Saliba point. I will refuse to have any sympathy for anybody, because everybody told me that, by the way, Rob Holding was good enough to replace William Saliba, or that it was Arsenal's fault for not recruiting a backup that is able to at least complement something that Saliba gets me. And so I'm sitting there and I'm saying, sorry, Manchester City deserve absolutely everything. And also, they recruited an entire new midfield the year before. Mateus Nunes, Kovacic, they recruited Calvin Phillips. They
Calvin
have
Phillips,
they have money. They have spent roughly 100
Mhm.
million pounds on attempted backups in midfield for a while. So I don't want to hear any excuses. Absolutely none.
No, but I also think you're trying to replace a Ballon d'Or level player. Like, you can't do that. So I think you have to find different ways of doing it. But as we know, they've struggled to do that, obviously, and understandably. Yeah, it's huge, man. And I also think you're kind of pointing around like the narratives, like not to project too much forward. But I almost predict that this is going to be, well, yeah, Arsenal won the title if we do so, but City didn't have Rodri. And
I'm not having
that's
that.
what people will be saying. And it's the same, but we weren't allowed to have that with Saliba, which, by the way, would be a similar level of impact on the team. Liverpool weren't allowed to have that with Van Dijk, by the way, when Van Dijk was injured out. Loads of people were just saying, look, you just bottled the title again, or whatever it might be. Look, you don't want to listen too much to narratives and people on social media. It's not that important. But I do think this is obviously significant. But this takes us back and goes, okay, so injuries do matter. Right, okay. So, but they don't matter when it's us. All right, makes sense.
Yeah, I will refuse to have anything made. Look, injuries are a point of football. And you know what? When Liverpool went through that next season after they had won the title and they had major injuries, what were everybody saying? I am not having any of it. And you know what? I am smiling. Everyone's saying, why are you smiling? I'm sorry. This makes Arsenal closer to winning the league.
It's
And
big
I'm
for
not,
Arsenal. That's
it's
that.
huge.
It's not smile. I'm not, as we said at the top of the stream, we're not smiling because a professional's been injured. Genuinely, best of luck to him and hope he recovers well because he's a brilliant footballer. But this is huge for Arsenal, which is what we care about. So,
And I'm sitting there and I'm sitting, we are 1 point better in the same fixtures that we've played last season compared to this season, by the way. If we were to have last year's point totals, we are 1 point better. And, we've done it through what I would argue some significant impact of off the pitch issues compared to this. I mean, Brighton, the way we dropped points was significant in terms of refereeing intervention. Even Manchester City, I maintain that game is 11v11. We win that game yesterday. That game is still 11v11. I'm confident of winning that game. And, I think from a perspective of what this team can do, this was, by the way, with an Arsenal team, people forget, with 2/3 of their midfield out.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I want to
I
come to
don't
that super
understand
chat. No Odegaard, no Marino, 10 men for a half and couldn't beat us. And that tells us the level that we were at yesterday, which is, which tells us that, we can take advantage of this. It's an even bigger sign.
which I'll add to that super chat really quickly. 24 shots, 1.07 XG in the same half.
Yeah, big. I just want to come to a couple of things. Where am I? Sorry, share my screen. Just trying to share my screen. So I want to come to this first and foremost, which is Rodri's injury history up to now. He's missed 19 days, 5 games up to this season. That's how much he's played for them. That's how significant he's been. That's how ever present he's been. That's who they build their team around. Obviously, he had the injury, but that's I think it was over the summer, sort of post Euros, and obviously came back sort of fairly recently. This is absolutely huge, and it's not only in terms of the significance for City in the league, whatever, but it's significant for Rodri. This is his first big injury. That's his total injury history, by the way, for Atletico, for whatever. So yeah, that's absolutely huge. And second and foremost, that's not a phrase, but you know what I mean. Secondly, I just want to read out some more stats, some more up-to-date stats in terms of City's chances and stats without Rodri. Just got them up here. So this is from the lazy FPL, this is huge for the Premier League and for FPL managers. Man City with Rodri, 74% wins, 11% losses. Man City without Rodri, 64% wins, 24% losses. And yeah, just how teams set up, how teams approach them. What do you think Rodri actually gives City, just literally from a tactical perspective? Like, how do they, if you know, say someone that barely ever watches City, what does he give them?
I can answer it easier with what he doesn't give them. I mean, for the list about what he gives them is much longer than the list that he doesn't give them. He gives them their entire identity. Everything flows through Rodri in terms of tempo, in terms of understanding when they progress centrally, in terms of when they progress from first phase buildup, when they progress in the final third, about when they speed up attacks to go around a team, whether to go through a team. The decision making starts and ends with Rodri. And everybody else is kind of a side piece to what his orchestra is, and he conducts where the team attacks, when they attack, and how much they attack down a particular area. And without that decision maker, I mean, Bernardo Silva is maybe the only other person that can kind of be someone that can operate in different areas of the pitch and drop in and try to help. But I mean, Rodri is he's not just the coach on the pitch. He's the coach, he's the captain, he's the team. He is the team, and he's the hub. And I think for a team that is so possession controlled, like Pep is incredibly different to Mikel. Pep has become, by the way, more vertical. Pep has become more cognizant of second balls. But by nature, Pep is absolutely somebody that says, I coach you to get you to the final third. And that's it. And that's his thing. And his entire coaching plan is Rodri in a sense. And so everybody in their team lacks the same verticality. I think Kovacic is somebody that's an incredible dribbler out of tight situations, but doesn't have the nuance or the nous to know when to penetrate, when to release the ball. Mateus Nunes, same thing. I think when you look at even John Stones, who is an incredible distributor and somebody that's very vertical between the lines, he doesn't carry the same tempo control that a Rodri does. And so I really don't see an equivalent help in terms of trying to replicate what Rodri does in here. And I think the best bet, I don't know, if I was Pep, I'd have other creative solutions, but I don't see an equivalent.
I think also we spoke on the pod, right, about in terms of City's approach and why I think the rivalry and the sort of the fever in that game yesterday is actually beneficial for us. Okay, you want to come up against us? You want to come up against Marino and Rice and Havertz and Saliba and Gabriel and duel us? Sure. With Rodri, that's someone who they can do that a bit with because of all these brilliant in possession stuff. He's also got the physicality. If you're trying to duel us in the midfield with a Gundogan or a Kovacic or a Rico Lewis, you can control a game 100%, but you can't duel against Arsenal in that way. So it takes another aspect of their game away, which I think is so important. Do you think City go into the market in January? I think the investigation is a big part of this. A big part of this.
That's what I said earlier.
People are saying, okay, let's go buy Zubamendi. Okay, he's not leaving for Liverpool.
No, I like I said earlier, I think it's a huge thing people are overlooking. I like what big game player Zubamendi, like name your best player that you feel City can attract because they're the best team in the world and they've got all the money in the world. Okay, calm. What player is going to move to a club that they have no idea whether or not their sanctions mean not only would the title be gone, guaranteed from that aspect, are they relegated? What is their relegation fee? What is the fees in terms of their wages? There's a lot of uncertainty about the future and the guarantee of money, factually speaking. They don't know what they're going to do. So how can you sit there and do that? So for me, the case is a much bigger factor towards January and the future of replacing. That's what that is. The case for me doesn't terribly impact what you're going to see because I could argue arbitration may delay the actual administration of point deductions to next season. There is a possibility where your point deduction doesn't even matter this season. It could happen later on. But for me, it's more of the impact of how do they build? How do they build with that kind of that statement looming over your head? It's really impossible.
Yeah. I haven't got loads of time, so we're going to have to come to a few more questions and then sort of close it out. Ford on Football says, I mentioned Bruno and Kimmich. I think, there's definitely players out there that City can go for, but it's the squad building, it's the team building, it's the wages, it's, it's all of the complications you'd have in trying to replace a player anyway before you add on the trial. And people saying that the trial isn't going to impact things, even if you think City are going to be acquitted of absolutely everything, even the question marks are a problem for agents. They're a problem for players. We know City players have got their exit strategies. We know. We've literally seen it constantly. You know, Haaland, that, you know, we've heard Saudi Arabia, we've seen Edison talking to, you know, there's loads of stuff that's going on and loads of conversations and sort of rumors that you hear about City players going, look, I want to be here, but if it all blows up, I need an exit strategy. I need to know where to go. Arsenal fans, you won't win in the league. Okay. Rodri is their version of Saliba in terms of impact, says Andre and Bergerus. Do you agree with that? Andre Bergerus. Do you agree with that?
I don't know, because I find that Arsenal are far more collective than City. City are a lot more, and have always been more individualistic in terms of, okay, so they have a high possession team, but again, Rodri is involved in so many phases. I mean, Saliba, for me, he's excellent in our build-up and excellent in getting us in terms of the middle third, but, you know, if we're really being honest, he's in the rest defense in terms of the final third. Like, our final third play operates a lot more, you could argue, on Ben White dynamism. It operates a lot more on Martin Odegaard in terms of getting us through, Bukayo Saka. The responsibility shifts. And for me, Rodri is at every level of Manchester City. Rodri is there. If you want to talk about build-up, he's there. If you want to talk about in the middle third, about breaking down mid-blocks, he's there. If you want to talk about in the final third, if City are struggling to get a goal, Rodri's box crashing has inevitably bailed them out so consistently. And so at every level of football, Rodri, for me, is at the core of what Manchester City do. And I just don't even know if Arsenal have a player like that. You could maybe argue Declan Rice, maybe Odegaard, but it's a little bit different. Yeah.
Yeah. Io Odemayo says Calvin Phillips recall. It's like, yeah, maybe that might be their best option, but actually that tells us the level, doesn't it?
You know what? Sure.
Do it. More than you believe. I'm going to finish there because I'm going to a show, George. I'm going to a show in Central London, a comedy show. So I'm going to finish there because I need to get to it. But yeah, huge news. Absolutely huge news. Yeah, look, as I said earlier on in the stream, it's very easy to pretend, you know, things are too hyperbolic and let's wait and see whatever. But there's absolutely a world in which this is the moment where the City dynasty is sort of kind of the beginning of the end. Absolutely. I'm not saying it is. I'm saying that there is a world in which we look back at this day, and we look back at the fact that Arsenal went on to win a title. We look back at, you know, what happens with the City investigation, and this was a very, very significant day in that, which is why I think it's so potentially impactful for Arsenal and definitely worth our time. And we'll also do some more analysis on it as and when we hear more news.
I think just really quickly, when you're talking about a fighter, this is a knockdown. This is a knockdown. It doesn't mean that he's gonna go out. There's still a 10-second count. Nothing's been played. Nothing's been decided. But it's a knockdown, and you know that's significant. And it definitely leads to you feeling like you can win the match at this point. And I feel that's the case from my perspective at the very least. And then when I look at it, I maintain what I said earlier. For me, what broke in Manchester City yesterday was far more significant than what I saw today. You know, I think that break in the will, and that was something that was significant. You follow it up with another major hit in terms of a player. And then when you start to go in terms of what January may offer, 3 strikes and you're out, mate. There's some major things that they're going to have to deal with at this point. And could they do it? Who knows? They would be truly the greatest team I've ever seen if they were. Let me put it that way. That if they were to overcome all of these things to still win the title this year, that would be something where I would say I don't think I've seen a better team in my life. So
George, yeah. I made a meme on the fly. It's Anthony Joshua, and that's City right now. And let's see if they get up. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate
it. Do you know? I saw a meme.
This is talent. This is the Cannon podcast. This is heritage.
This is heritage. But you know what I saw too? Do you know the Lilo and Stitch when he's like reverse and he's on his head? There's a meme of somebody doing that side by side right now, and I think that really applies. Love
it. And Luke Sherlock says, well, that's nice, mate. Speedy recovery. Yes, we'll finish there. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you being here for a very random and slightly chaotic stream, but appreciate it. Nearly 750 viewing, which is nice. Make sure you subscribe to the Cannon podcast. We just did an episode of the main podcast where we discussed the game yesterday, so you can go check that out on the Cannon podcast. Got loads of exclusive stuff coming out on Patreon and YouTube members. We started a Discord for Patreon and YouTube members, which is popping off today. And you managed to jump on it, George.
I somehow got off my landline, guys.
We got the technophobe on Discord, which is crazy. Thanks everyone. And yeah, of course we'll come to this news and more as we hear more and sort of hear more fallout from it. Thank you, George.
Thank you, good sir.
Thanks for watching, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.